feel like in UNICEF China, the UN China, and maybe just being in China, every day is a learning experience. We wanted to develop a plan that really looks at the most vulnerable and delivers quality assistance to every child.
You know, Cynthia, you put it so well. I think this is where the South-South aspect of our cooperation really comes in. There's no better organization than UNICEF to actually help do that. Hello, my name is Siddharth Chatterjee. I am the United Nations Resident Coordinator in China, and welcome to Delivering is One, a UN in China conversation. In this podcast, we highlight the heads of UN agencies in China who shape our diversity, discover their motivations, and find out about their work here on the ground. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Cynthia McCaffrey, the United Nations Children's Fund Representative to China. Ms. McCaffrey, an American national, joined the UN family in China in 2016. Cynthia, welcome to Delivering is One.
Thank you, Sid. It's great to be here.
So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your early life, your years growing up, your early career.
Thanks. Let me first say that I'm very excited to be on your podcast, Delivering as One, but I'm also nervous because you are such a good communicator that I'm hoping that I can communicate as clearly, but you'll help me if I don't, I hope.
Oh, you're far better, Cynthia. I can assure you of that.
We'll see. Early life, in a nutshell, I am a fourth generation New York City kid. So that means my dad, my grandfather, my great-grandmother were all born and raised in New York City, which can be unusual. And my mom was Texan, so I'm half Texan. Grew up with a younger brother and sister, very close. And I think it shaped me because my parents really instilled and exemplified a love and a respect for learning and knowledge, growing up and pursuing things with conviction and courage. And I think that may have manifested in places that my brother and sister and I ended up. So my sister is an interventional radiologist, very specialized, one of the few women in her field. My brother is a stand-up comic lawyer, not at the same time, but he's performed all over the US and is now practicing law and doing stand-up. And then I'm here in China with you and the UN.
Fantastic. How exciting. I hope everything's safe in New York. We've heard of the recent flooding.
Yes, I mean, I think I'm still waiting for news from people, but it's been quite a year and a half for New York City, hasn't it?
Hasn't it been indeed, yeah. So tell us, how did you eventually come to work with the United Nations in China?
Lots of good luck. My career started with the International Rescue Committee. So I got into international humanitarian work early. And then I just had a wonderful journey. And I know your story a bit, Sid. You know, if you're open and nimble, you think you're going in one direction, but you turn right, then left. And so fortunately, I was sitting in the Office of Innovation in New York, and the opportunity came, and the executive director and my regional director decided to take a risk and appointed me. And I was nervous because this was a big office. It's an important country. And I think I give credit to my husband and my two daughters who said, go for it, you can do it. And that's probably the fact that the executive director, the regional director said, you can do it, but then that my husband and kids said, let's go for it.
Fantastic. That's so good to know. And you know, the thing is that I think UNICEF is undoubtedly a redoubtable organization which has really made a difference. And I see that China as a country really supports the vision and aspirations of UNICEF. So I think your timing of coming here is absolutely perfect. So tell us, what does your organization do to support the people of China, the country's priorities, and the UN family at large?
So we are pleased to have come back to China in 1979 with the rest of the UN. A little known fact is that UNICEF was in China from 1946 to 1951, helping children and mothers most vulnerable, mostly with health and emergency nutrition. But we're very proud to have been here for the last 42 years. And we came back with the UN to do the work that the member states have, put in our hands, which is building on the UN Charter, and then the other instruments that have been created for supporting women, people living with disability, and children, the CRC, CEDAW, and others. So what we're doing here is building on those over 40 years of experience, and we're working with the government of China to focus on the most vulnerable. That's what the government of China wants us to do with our country program. And we do that three ways, is that we identify those children, those populations that are most in need. And then UNICEF brings, and we rely a lot on the UN and partners around the world, the knowledge, the lessons, the expertise, the standards that we're constantly learning. And we bring those to China to apply those, to fill these gaps, to bring quality assistance. And then third, with those lessons and that knowledge and that capacity building, we test it with the government of China. When things work and lessons are applied, we scale it up. And I can give an example, because UN loves to talk in broad spectrum. I think one of the examples that I often use that you may have heard is the barefoot social workers. So in 2010, the government of China and UNICEF identified that in vulnerable areas, that it would be useful to put trained cadre of people, a barefoot social worker, on the ground. And UNICEF had seen and learned that around the world, is that putting social workers closer to the communities makes a difference. 120 villages in 2010, 120 barefoot social workers, or what we call child directors. And 10 years later, we've scaled that up to 660,000 villages and barefoot social workers. And we've learned a lot along the way, and the government of China, going forward from 2021 forward, is committed to putting a barefoot social worker in every village in China, because it's work. The village knows the person knows the village, and they can identify children at risk or help a child who may already be in harm's way.
It's very interesting that you mentioned the barefoot doctors. It's something which I've always been repeating in Africa, because, imagine that what China achieved in the space of global public health in the country through the barefoot doctors and the interventions that they had in terms of uplifting human capital, because we know that education and skills and health are the crucible on which human capital progresses. I mean, I can just imagine that if we can actually take China's lessons to, say, Africa, and we can actually create millions of healthcare volunteers who are technologically savvy, that would really reshape the global public health agenda. And perhaps that's something we should be further looking at together, to look at how can we take this knowledge of barefoot doctors and really, because that is the aspiration that Dr. Tedros also has, of creating this army of community health workers. And I think those are going to be absolutely critical, be it from child health to dealing with issues of malnutrition, dealing with pandemics, everything.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And Ethiopia has a fantastic model of community health workers.
Indeed.
I think while Dr. Tedros was
started by Dr.
Yeah.
Tedros, those health extension work. I'd actually taken a few governors when I was working with UNFPA in Kenya to look at their health extension program, because they were able to achieve the MDG 5 target of reducing
mortality rate. And that's where you do see it's a back and forth, where we bring ideas, test them in China, and then we're taking lessons back and forth. And that two-way street is important.
Cynthia, you put it so well. I think this is where the South-South aspect of our cooperation really comes in. It's the knowledge that we can take from China to the rest of the world, and no better organization than UNICEF to actually help do that, simply because of your footprint and presence, particularly in some of the most vulnerable and fragile parts of the world. So this is exciting. More to talk about on this. So let's talk about your organization in terms of the principles of leaving no one behind. And could you provide some insight on the key beneficiaries of your organization in China?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm glad that you pressed me here today, but also that you're pressing us in the UN country team as we look at leaving no one behind, because UNICEF is doing its work, but it really takes the whole UN family to leverage each other, to leverage the network that we have across the ministries in China, but also we have different networks that we can use across the world. So, as I said, when we looked at where we are today in China and with the government of China, we wanted to develop a plan that really looks at the most vulnerable and closes those gaps and delivers quality assistance to every child. And so, building on those principles that from the very founding of the UN with the UN Charter, and then the more recent instrument like the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which China signed early and also ratified very quickly. So working on those principles, how we've come to look at those children that we can focus on. Underlying your question, Sid, is why are you in China? It's got big capacity, large economy, but it's the second largest youth population in the world, almost 300 million children. 100 million children are affected by migration. 30 million children under the age of 17 talk about mental health challenges, emotional, mental, and behavioral health challenges. So there are challenges here. And that's what we've decided to do with the government of China, is how do we home in on providing assistance to those children and give them quality assistance. An example might be looking at our early childhood development. And I think as we engage more and more with youth, one of the messages that UNICEF has is you have to make sure that you also invest with children young, because it makes their life as they grow to adolescence and adulthood much easier. So UNICEF has identified with the government of China those living who may be affected by migration, or children living with disability, those living in poorer provinces that may be close to relative poverty, and we're working with early childhood development. A child's brain develops to 80% of its capacity by the age of 3. And by the age of 5, 90% of the brain is developed. So it's important that we work with communities, parents, on how to have positive parenting, how to talk about nutrition early. And we've created early childhood development centers around the country, and we intend to invest in those and in training around positive parenting. We're also working with the private sector as well as the public sector to create family-friendly policies that enable parents, mothers and fathers, to have paid paternal and maternal leave, to have breastfeeding rooms, those types of investments that we can make across all sectors to invest in early childhood development. Because as you know from your work, when you invest early, it sets up a child to enter school ready to learn, do well in school, and then sets them up for adolescence and adulthood.
Yeah. You know, what is pretty remarkable is the fact that with a population the size of China, that they've managed to do so well. I mean, what is it that we could be sharing, Cynthia, for example, from China with the rest of the world, particularly in the space of nutrition? China has done very well on food security, no doubt about that. The fact that it's able to feed such a large population, and you know, the intersection between food security and ending poverty is clear, you know, and that is why SDG 1 and SDG 2 follow each other, because it's part of the unfinished business. But malnutrition is a global problem. It's not exclusive to any particular country in the world, but we have a major issue there. What is it that we could be looking at in China that we could improve upon in China, and also sharing China's lessons? Because dealing with a population size of, say, 1.4 billion compared to, let's say, where I'm coming from in Kenya, where I was dealing with a population of 47 million, it's a whole different scale. So just for our listeners to kind of understand the scale and magnitude that UNICEF is working with the government of China, what are the weak links, what can be improved, and what do you think we could be sharing?
So I'd love to pick up on the issue of malnutrition and nutrition in general, because I think it's a wonderful story, and it's one that the government of China is also picking up on, that they see that they're on a different chapter. But China has made great progress. When UNICEF first came here, the challenge was around stunting and wasting, and they've addressed that so to reduce it significantly. This is a much smaller problem, because the nutrition of the population has improved so much, and with the economy growing, but also an understanding of nutrition. Yin Yang Bao is a program that was rolled out in 2008 and is still used in some of the provinces where you have the most vulnerable population. But the government of China has been able to get this nutrition supplement to the most vulnerable families and really been able to reduce stunting and wasting and have stronger nutrition. Now, the government of China is looking at a newer problem that has come and is coming more with middle-income countries and upper middle-income countries, of increasing obesity and overweight. And the smart thing that the government is doing is not waiting around, but trying to address it, so that they're looking at this triple burden. Continue to take care of those populations that may have malnutrition, but address this increasing obesity and overweight. So to give our listeners some numbers, children under the age of 6, the prevalence of obesity and overweight in China is 10%. It's growing. So this is a trend that
That's quite high.
that we want to stop and halt and reverse. Children 17 and under in the adolescent age group, it's 19% prevalence of overweight and obesity. And you know the problems this brings in health and confidence in an adolescent.
And the spread of non-communicable
Exactly.
diseases like diabetes and hypertension.
And the stress that puts on a health system that no country needs. So I think a lesson that we're learning is looking at how China has addressed the stunting and the wasting and improved that. It's investing a lot in infant young child feeding, so continuing to improve that understanding at the beginning of life of nutrition and using that to expand the importance of good nutrition. And this is where One UN also comes in. We're working closely with WFP, FAO, UN Women, EFAD, SCAP, and under leadership that you've convened us in some different fora, we've come together to look at healthy food systems, food waste. Government of China will be leading reducing food waste.
That's one of President Xi Jinping's
priorities.
Key clarion calls of reducing food waste globally.
Exactly. So we build on that, and that's one of the main things that we're working on is identifying good nutrition, healthy food systems, and making sure that parents, caregivers, schools, and young people themselves understand what a healthy food system is, what a healthy diet is, and then they can also understand and demand that they have that. We're working with the private sector to look at how we market to young people and make sure that they know that it's good to have transparent, proper marketing so that young people make the right healthy choices.
Great. Very interesting. What an interesting insight. There's another thing that, for example, I've lived in Africa for so long, and one of the biggest challenges Africa is confronted with is traditional harmful practices like female genital mutilation, like early marriage. China has overcome a lot of these traditional harmful barriers, such as the end of foot binding. Cynthia, I'm just curious, are there lessons that we could actually take from China to the rest of the world where we still have challenges such as these traditional harmful practices?
I think one is what China has done with education. So when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals and what China has achieved in primary school parity and equity, that they've achieved boys and girls in school, and the investment that they've made in primary school, and that is actually extending into middle high school, upper high school, as well as vocational training. So I think that investment and that visceral, very profound respect that the Chinese have for education and learning helps people to know and to understand what best practices are. So I think number one is that you've got a very strong education system that people are learning and they are invested in that. I think the second is the work that the UN is doing more and more around young people and engaging young people, because that helps us to talk about behavior, traditions, not just with children, but with families and with education systems. And so I think that's a lesson that we can take to other countries, is that investment in education and learning in all kinds of pathways, right? There's not one pathway, and China is investing more and more. One of our priorities over the next 5 years is early learning and school readiness. And that may be another, so that every child comes into school on a more equal footing. Then that investment that China's made in primary education. And then the investment that the 14th five-year plan is talking about in vocational training. So there's numerous pathways. And then engaging young people, which you are a huge advocate for. Talk to young people, then you talk to their parents, you're into schools, you're into communities, and I think that's something that has worked well here and can work elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, fantastic. And the fact is that also the number of women that we see in China that are actually in the workforce, it's clear that any country, I think China in many ways reaped a demographic dividend by making sure that women were in the workforce, and therefore the barriers or obstacles that they confronted were overcome. And I think perhaps this is another conversation we need to be having with several African countries and African country teams on what we should be doing in terms of this form of behavioral knowledge sharing and public policy knowledge sharing as well. So I'm quite excited about the prospects of where we can actually take the UN delivering as one focus onto in a multiple number of dimensions. It's not just hard program interventions, but really the soft power of knowledge that we could be sharing.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that, I don't know how to convey it to our listeners is we have a very strong partnership with the government. So on gender, for example, tremendous progress, good lessons to learn, but we're also having valuable conversations with the government around how to really improve it. So the family-friendly policies, for example, and how to work at really creating for young women and young mothers in particular, young families, that opportunity and possibility to keep a career and have a family. And China's recognizing, they're coming to us and talking to us, UN Women, UNFPA. We're having trouble getting it right. We're listening to the women and employers how to get it right. But being able to have that open conversation, test things here, see what works, see what doesn't work, scale it here, take it elsewhere, I think is important. And that's something that, thanks to you, we're able to have here. And that will be valuable for programs in China, but also around the world, that we're able to say, hey, this didn't work. How do we try something else?
As the good old saying goes, women hold up half the sky, what Chairman Mao once said. And I think that needs to be the clarion call throughout the world. If we want to actually see action on SDG 5, otherwise it will remain a pipe dream and we'll come to 2030 and still bring SDG 5 back into a new sustainable development framework. So I think important lessons that could be shared both in China and also with the rest of the world. Okay, so help us identify some of the remaining development challenges faced in China in the coming years and how you think UNICEF, as part of the UN family in China, will assist China in achieving those particular areas of the SDGs.
So I think one is, again, focusing on the fact that there are vulnerable populations. And so we want to focus on that together with the rest of the UN and with our partners. I think the second is, don't forget the progress that we've made. So like early childhood development that I spoke about is making sure that we continue to have that early investment. And it makes a difference. I mean, just to tell a personal story where you hear these numbers. Early in my tenure, I had the chance to go to Shaanxi province and visit one of the early childhood development centers. And I met a grandmother who was caring for her 5-year-old grandson because the parents had to migrate and were gone for long periods of time. And in the center, this 5-year-old boy, lively, talkative, playing, but she described when they came 2 years prior that he wasn't speaking, he was in a corner by himself at home. And when a local social worker had helped them find this center, she said suddenly he was in a place where there were trained professionals who could talk about the type of stimulation that benefits a child. He had peers to play with. She had a network that helped her. So she had not only the ECD experts, but she had other parents, grandparents, caregivers. And she said she saw fairly quickly how this stimulation, the positive parenting, the way to play with the child, helped get him out of his shell, helped to get him to that development. And just think, if you hadn't had that this little boy wouldn't be as school ready for his learning. Now he must be in 2nd grade, but he was speaking and playing and ready to go to school. So keep those investments, and those are the types of things we want to support the government. Look at the emerging issues, and this is one of the things that's exciting about our partnership. Mental health. I think we've all identified it across the UN is this emerging issue around mental health, particularly around young people. In China, up to 30 million children between 6 and 17 have described challenges with either mild or severe depression. And so this is an area that we're working with the government of China to first of all talk to young people and understand the issues that they may be having, talking with schools and parents to understand the pressures that may come on a child, whether it's school learning, whether it's bullying or online. So we're trying to get those issues on the table. And then to create the systems, whether it's from peer to peer, whether it's how teachers are trained to deal with it, also parents, how they're given positive parenting and how to help children who may struggle with stress or pressure or just depression. And so get that on the table. In October, UNICEF, you'll know this well since you know the UN, is releasing its State of the World's Children, and it's on mental health. And so that'll be an opportunity for us to talk around the world about lessons that are being learned and things that are working that we can all learn to apply. And China will be a part of that dialogue. And then we've got World Children's Day on November 20th, and we want to focus on this issue with the UN and across the government of China to highlight what is the issue around mental health and how do we address it in an effective way.
Great. Thank you for that. Perhaps the pandemic has also kind of created
Yeah.
globally
Yeah.
a major challenge in mental health across the world. So I think it's another public health pandemic which has reached, epidemic proportions that we need to be addressing. Yeah.
Maybe it's a positive in that it's definitely added to it, but maybe it's also helped us all understand it, right? We've all probably felt a bit more stress, depression because of it.
Great. So what does a normal day look like for you, Cynthia? I mean, you lead an organization, you're a mother who has children in school, you're a wife, you have so many responsibilities. So what does a normal day look for you?
Well, one, it doesn't look like this, where I get to sit across the table from the resident coordinator in this august opportunity to speak. So this is a special day where I get to come and talk to you. I think it's two things. And I would say one of them is a quote. My mother used to always say this, and there's different people who get credited, but one of them is the Frenchman Ledru Rollin, who said, "I must hurry up and catch up with my people, for I am their leader." And that's how I feel every day at UNICEF. Even in the UN country team, I feel like I'm always running to catch up because I have the privilege of working with a team that's smart, that's committed, that works with conviction. So I'm always thinking, oh, I have to hurry and catch up with them. I think a recent example would be the floods. You sent out an early letter to the government saying, UN is here, we can help. The team, without much from me, said, we've got to get hygiene kits. We've got to get these in quickly because time matters and they need it now. And so we were able to deliver within days. We were able to procure and deliver assistance to get to that. And that's an example of the team coming to me and saying, go, 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 go. And I thought, yeah, go, 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 go. I think the other that I feel like is a daily thing, and it may be particularly in China. I'd be curious what you think, but I have to go to the Chinese proverb. I'll have to translate it because I don't know if my Mandarin will translate, but 水无止境, which means there is no end to learning. And that when I first was coming, Vice Minister Ma, who was at the time the Chinese perm rep to the UN, I had the opportunity to meet with him, and he said, go in with an open mind and be open to learning because you will never be an expert in or on China. And I think that has one thing I wanted to appreciate is China's patience, understanding, to be continually learning, and my team's patience to continually let me learn. But I think that's both a struggle, right? So I run into an issue, I don't quite understand it, but it's also, it makes the day never dull, right? There's always something that I don't quite understand that I have to learn about. So I think that's a typical day, is chasing after my team to catch up and constantly learning.
Fantastic. Actually, that's quite inspiring, and that's a leadership lesson for many, many people, including me. So what does, Cynthia, delivering as one for the UN mean to you? It's an often used term. The Secretary General came in with the agenda. He said that he wants to reform the UN, make sure that the UN is fit for purpose and delivers as one. What does that mean to you?
So one thing that I haven't said that I wanted to make sure I say, and this is an opportunity, is that UNICEF is here to advance, protect the well-being and rights of all children. And the Sustainable Development Goals are a critical to-do list for us. And that's a guide that you're always reminding us of. And we have it on our lapel pins, we have it in our offices, that these are bold goals that the world has signed up to, that we are here to help China deliver, and also to deliver lessons around the world. So I think delivering as one is a strong reminder that getting that agenda, the Sustainable Development Goals, delivered and capturing the lessons is what that is all about. You reminded us earlier this week that the Secretary General's statement about UN reform and delivering as one is not about the processes, but it's about how to make the UN the most effective, impactful organization that it can be. And so that's what I take the SG statement to heart, is that's what we're trying to do. How do we take delivering as one, leverage each other, learn from each other, and deliver those sustainable development goals? So a good example is UNAIDS here in China is leading 10 organizations, including UNICEF, to really make progress for people and children living with HIV and AIDS. China has taken on the task of eliminating mother-to-child transmission, not of just HIV, but syphilis and hepatitis B. So the team that UNAIDS is leading is all of us together working with the government to do that. Going back to the healthy food systems and the healthy diets, we're working together with FAO, EFAD, UN Women. We're working with embassies, WFP, to come together to work at how do we look at understanding and conveying the knowledge about healthy food systems and diets. But that's not just UNICEF. We've got a corner of it. UN Women is looking at the role of women farmers. FAO and WFP and EFAD are looking at the stronger health systems, the mechanization of it. So that makes the package deliverable. You're leading all of this, and you're helping to be that effective conductor that makes sure if somebody isn't playing, that we bring them in to make this all work. So that's delivering as one is number one about the impact we can have. We're much more effective together. And not only are we effective at implementing, but we can constantly learn from each other.
Fantastic, which leads me to a final question then. Is what do you think makes a good resident coordinator in that case?
Probably go back to the conductor, right? You have, I would say, probably three things. Number one is you have a unique view. You're able to sit in that conductor's podium and see all of the orchestra. And so you're able to see, but I can't see, I don't get to see it from the same view. That enables you to also see where there are different strengths, right? So you need the horns to come in at a certain time, but you need the drums to be quiet. And so I think that your ability to also push and pull us and have that judgment to do that. And then I think third, that you do very well is you're able to listen and communicate. I think one of the things that I'm grateful for is your ability to convey clearly to someone who doesn't get into the morass of the bureaucracy, what is the UN about? And reminding our listeners, people on the street, that we're here to serve the people of China, the children of China, the women of China. And so I think you're able to create that beautiful orchestra sound, and that means that you often are the one who has to kind of lead in delivering that message. So I think it's use your vision. You've got a unique vision that you see. Use it. Use it to push and pull the right instruments in at the right time, and continue to tell that story and help us to play that music in a way that sounds right and good and understandable. You have a way of distilling CPD, a UNSDCF, into understandable language. For the listeners, those are terms that any UN worker would understand, but we speak in acronyms.
For all of us as resident coordinators, we are also learning. And I think we also constantly need to upgrade our skills. So this is a message to my fellow resident coordinators who may be listening into this podcast, is what Cynthia has just said, that we have to be good orchestra conductors. We have to have a vision with very strong listening skills and be able to distill complex messages and make it simple. And finally, we must be capable communicators. Thank you, Cynthia, for sharing your story and sharing your time with us today. Follow Cynthia on Twitter. By the way, Cynthia, what is your Twitter handle?
Ms. C. McCaffrey is on Twitter, because all my others were taken. So Ms. C. McCaffrey, but now you're forcing me to get much more active on Twitter, which I will do now.
So people will get to know what you're thinking and what you're saying and what UNICEF is doing.
So give me a few days, guys, to get up to speed.
Fantastic, fantastic. Have a lovely day, Cynthia, and have a great weekend. And thank you for joining us. If you would like to learn more, visit china.un.org or follow the UN in China on Twitter. Join us next time for another installment of Delivering as One, a UN in China conversation.